Guys, the 40-man is cluttered. We cannot find a spot for JJ Wetherholt. But today on his birthday, we're going to get one for Randy Carricker. We're going to move things around. We're going to all say, I guess we have so many center fielders now, we can just say goodbye to Michael Ciani.
Calling him out by
we're going to get Randy Carricker right on the 40-man for Michael Ciani. Speaking of those center fielders, they both each had a nice little play yesterday. We get Ryan Church, who's everyone talks about his defense, makes a big defensive play. And then Hampson makes an actual play from the plate. How about that?
Hey, it's nice to participate. It's good.
People are still not happy about him being here.
Well, he's here.
Yeah.
He's here for now,
You can't find a spot on the 40-man. And let's just get into that too, because Brendan Donovan heads to the IL.
Right.
That means the Cardinals have a spot. They can make a move. And at that point, you just got to get Jose Fermin up. If you have a chance to get Jose Fermin up, you have to take it, Brendan.
I mean, they've been very reluctant to do that all season long, right? From the beginning of the season, there was that whole deal where he kind of thought he was going to be on the team, and then
I forgot about that.
He wasn't on the team, and they didn't bring him up for a while, had good numbers in the minors. We've seen Fermin a couple of times this season. His numbers are good with St. Louis, but clearly, I mean, Rock, they went a whole weekend without Brendan Donovan, and Contreras was out for that period as well. Now, he came back last night, but they went a whole weekend without Donovan and said nobody is better than making a move and bringing up Fermin. And look, they were hoping that the same thing would happen with Donovan that happened with Contreras, where after a few days he would be able to rejoin the team and it would work out. As they go on the road trip, they realize Donovan has not progressed to the point where that is going to be possible. And so you reluctantly make the move at that time. And I get it, because Donovan's their best player. If he's not their best player, he's one of their best players. And so the possibility of having him for, 5-6 days instead of having to have him sit on the IL like he's going to do all week at this point, that's what they were striving for. That's what they were hoping to get. And frankly, when you look at the 40-man roster, this is how it ties back into the Wetherholt stuff for me. You look at the 40-man roster and you say, the guys that we could bring up for a Brendan Donovan or for, whoever the injured player might be, they're not going to be primary contributors for us. And so we'll kind of take the chance to play short for a few days and see if we can't get Donnie to the other side of that injury where he can come back and help us. The 40-man roster is supposed to be your 26-man, your active roster, and then some guys who are available to you in a pinch, like when players get hurt and you can call them up and they can be legitimate contributors. And then it's prospects who you had to protect because of the Rule 5 draft, but they're just not quite ready for the big leagues just yet. But for the most part, you want to be using your 40-man roster when the situation calls upon it. And that was the case here, where I just felt like the Cardinals were very reluctant because they looked at the options and said, well, we'd rather just go without Donnie for a few days and hope and pray that we can get him back, because that's going to be a more significant benefit to our team than anybody we could bring up from the 40-man. Unfortunately, the injury continued for as long as it did with Donovan, and they reluctantly made the decision. But that's the frustration, is like, if you don't want to use the 40-man as is, why are we kind of creating all this consternation surrounding Wetherholt, who frankly may not be ready for the big leagues? But the reason that he's not ready, to me, should not have anything to do with the 40-man roster. I know that there are people out there who disagree, but I think when we break it down, I look at that and say, I don't agree with that line of thinking.
Yeah, just being fair, I can't figure out the logic that John Mozeliak is coming from. Just from the 40-man excuse. Let's keep the potential things that could explain it. Just coming from the 40-man reasoning.
Let's start with that. Let's be fair to this.
I'm confused, and also I'll say that I'll add on this really quick. The other part of my confusion is, if this is about protection years with young players, then we better see some other players get called up in September, like a Jimmy Crooks. Because if that's what this is about, and knowing what you have for a player in their protection year, when you got to put him on the 40-man. Seems like a pretty obvious guy to get, as many at-bats as possible in September to see, well, what do we have at a position where the future is 19 years old and 3 or 4 years away in Rainiel Rodriguez?
Yeah, I mean, with Jimmy Crooks, what the conversation should be about for each individual player is, are they ready?
Mm-hmm.
Are they ready to contribute to the big leagues? I think there's a case to be made that Jimmy Crooks is not necessarily ready for everything that comes along with the catcher position at the big league level. Like, he would be coming in, he'd be game planning, he would be drinking through the fire hose. But is there a conversation to be had about, well, call up Jimmy Crooks? Maybe he's not starting every day, but you know what, the way that he might be able to learn some things about the way it operates in the big leagues, sitting back, watching Pedro Pajes game plan, being around the environment, and then playing a couple of times a week to be able to get your feet wet. Like, there's a case to be made that would be valuable. It's up to the Cardinals to decide if Jimmy Crooks is ready for that. And like, that's the part of this that I don't want to get lost. I don't know for sure whether Jimmy Crooks is ready for that. We can sit on the outside and say it seems like it would be beneficial because, again, I wouldn't be calling on him to start every day. I would be saying, hey, look, we get it that at this point in your career, you're young enough that playing time regularly is valuable, and Crooks can get that in Memphis if he stays there the rest of the year. But I also think he's close to the cusp of he's going to have to go on the 40-man, and then he comes into spring training trying to win a job of some capacity, whether it's to be the starter, to be the backup. And so giving him some, on the job experience at the big league level in September, to me, would be valuable with Crooks specifically.
By the way, it's not just is Crooks ready to be like, is he better than Pages right now? Because you also have in their protection year is Bernal. Mm-hmm. So there's also a thing where, like, if you think Crooks is more MLB ready than Bernal right now, I think there's a point where using September to find out, is Crooks the guy we put on? Like, do we put both of them on the 40?
Yeah.
Or do we unprotect Jimmy Crooks because we protect Bernal because we see what Jimmy Crooks is at the major league level and we say this isn't. We can risk this guy going, being available to other teams. Like, there is another factor in the fact that you have another guy in his protection year at the catcher spot who so far isn't past Crooks, but might have a better ceiling.
Well, we'll get back to the Wetherholt part of this as well. But since we're kind of neck deep in the catcher stuff right now, if you bring up Crooks, he's on the 40-man. Now to get him off the 40-man, you'd have to expose him to waivers, which is not, that's a little bit different than the Rule 5 thing. That's because teams would readily take Crooks through waivers because they wouldn't have to keep him on the active roster a whole year. With the Rule 5, there's at least that impediment where it's like, if a team's going to take a guy, they have to know they're going to keep him on the 26-man roster the entire year, or they end up losing him back to the previous team. So you wouldn't put Crooks on the 40-man and then, decide whether or not to keep him. Once he's there, he's kind of stuck there. But you're going to protect him, and you're going to protect Bernal as well. And people might say, well, my gosh, that could be a lot of catchers on the 40-man. What people are forgetting is that Wilson Contreras is not one, and Ivan Herrera is not one. So, and then Pozo's done a really nice job. I don't know what his long-term future is going to be. He could be a casualty of the fact that they've just got a lot of catching prospects, and one of them needs to be the backup.
That would be 4 on the 40-man
It would be
roster.
4, and then I'm saying with Pozo, I'm not saying that he's not been a really nice player, but there will be decisions made about that if you've got 2 other catchers on the 40, and then Pages as well. I'm not saying that anybody's job is just, locked in stone for next year, but that would be kind of the way I would look at it, is like, can Crooks be ready to at least be a halftime catcher for next year? If so, does that sort of push out somebody else from that catcher room as we're talking about the 40-man? Because that's what we're going to get back to with Wetherholt. I'll let you make whatever point you're about to make, but that's the thing with Wetherholt is, like, there are a number of players that will need to be protected from the Rule 5 draft this winter. And that's why when Mozeliak talks about protection year, there's 5 to 7 guys, maybe more, that are in that conversation. My point would be, I think you can find the spots, but where were you heading with this?
Just one last thing on Pozo.
Yeah.
With the way that rosters are built today in Major League Baseball, and I'm talking about the actual Major League roster, can you have a guy who's just a pinch hitter? Because what if we just say Yoel Pozo is just a pinch hitter, essentially, and an emergency catcher? It
depends on what the rest of the makeup of your bench is, I would think, because right now you've got a guy who largely is just out there to play defense in Garrett Hampson, right? So if you had, and I hate to say it because people love to rip on Hampson, but if you had a guy that was like Hampson and could play outfield and infield and pretty much play just anywhere, does that afford you the luxury to say, hey, from the right side, we've got this guy who can come off the bench and he'll bat just about every game? And people will cry because there's 3 catchers on the team, I think is the direction you're going with that. If it was like,
I'm saying we should just delineate him. He is now just a pinch hitter.
Right.